On March 3, 1985, pilot Carlos Mendoza was flying over the Atacama Desert on a routine mapping mission. What he found that day would forever change our understanding of the possible. At 2,400 meters altitude, where official maps showed only sand and rock, a complete city appeared before his eyes. Perfectly preserved, completely empty. It wasn't an ancient ruin or a settlement abandoned due to drought. It was Esperanza del Norte, a prosperous mining city where 8,000 people had lived, worked, and dreamed until the night of October 15, 1973. That night, between 9 p.m. and dawn the following day, all its inhabitants simply disappeared. Chapter 1. The night 8,000 people disappeared. Mendoza landed on the outskirts and walked down the main street. The first thing he noticed was the silence. Not that normal desert silence, but something denser, heavier, as if the air itself was waiting for someone to break it. The houses had their doors open. On a table at La Esperanza Café, there were half-finished cups of coffee. Cars were parked in perfect lines, many with keys still in the ignition. When the government sent a military team 3 days later, they found even more disturbing details. In the refrigerator of house number 47 on Minero Street, the milk was fresh. Impossible after 12 years, but there it was. The bread at the Hermanos Castillo bakery showed no signs of mold. At San Jose Hospital, blood bags in the blood bank remained liquid, as if time had selectively stopped for certain objects. Captain Roberto Fuentes, who led that first military expedition, left a report that was classified as secret for years. According to his notes, all the clocks in the city, from the great clock in the plaza to the wristwatches on nightstands, had stopped at exactly 11:47 p.m. It wasn't an electrical failure. The mechanical clocks, the digital ones, all marked the same impossible time. But what truly chilled the military team's blood was the mayor's diary, Manuel Cortez, found open on his desk. The last entry, written in clear, calm handwriting at 9:15 p.m. on October 15th, spoke of preparations for tomorrow and mentioned a community meeting scheduled for 8 a.m. the next day. Nothing in his words suggested panic, evacuation, or danger. It was as if tomorrow had simply never arrived. The soldiers tried to use their radios to report the findings, but discovered another anomaly. The equipment worked perfectly outside the city perimeter, but inside, although they received signals, they couldn't transmit. It was as if an invisible bubble absorbed all outgoing communications. They had to walk 2 kilometers outside the city limits to contact their superiors. And then there was the wealth that nobody touched. The central bank of Esperanza del Norte had its vault open. Not forced, simply open, as if the manager had forgotten to close it at the end of the day. Inside, 3.7 tons of gold ingots, millions in Chilean pesos from that era, property documents for the most productive mines in the region. Everything intact. At the Diamantes del Desierto jewelry store, display cases exhibited Colombian emerald necklaces and South African diamond rings. There were no broken windows, no signs of looting. The houses of mining executives told similar stories. In the mansion of the director of Compañía Minera Esperanza, a grand piano waited in the living room, with a Chopin score open on the music stand. In the garage, 3 imported Mercedes-Benz with full tanks and keys on perfectly labeled dashboards. In the wine cellar, French wine bottles worth fortunes. Why abandon all this? What could make 8,000 people leave behind not only their material possessions, but apparently their very lives, in a matter of hours? The first theories emerged quickly. We were in the midst of the Cold War, and Chile had experienced the military coup barely a month earlier. Some suggested a secret evacuation due to nuclear threat, but there was no radiation. Others spoke of intelligence about a catastrophic earthquake that never came. But the seismographs of the time recorded no warnings. The most disturbing theory came from the miners themselves from nearby cities. They spoke in low voices about the deep tunnels of Esperanza del Norte, about copper veins that went deeper into the earth than any other mine in the region. They whispered about drilling equipment that had been hastily removed 2 weeks before the disappearance, about engineers who refused to talk about what they had found at 800 meters depth. Military psychologists, for their part, pointed to reports of erratic behavior in the population during the preceding weeks. The town doctor had documented a 400% increase in insomnia consultations. The primary school teacher had sent a letter to educational authorities mentioning that children were obsessively drawing spirals and talking about the visitors who come at night. But no theory explained why birds avoided flying over the city, or why compasses spun out of control when approaching the central plaza. Chapter 2. The City That Time Forgot. When the first architects and engineers arrived to study Esperanza del Norte in 1986, they expected to find a typical mining town from northern Chile. What they discovered left them speechless. The urban layout defied all known logic. The streets didn't follow the traditional grid pattern, but formed a perfect spiral around the central plaza, as if the entire city were a gigantic mandala of concrete and asphalt. Structural engineer Luis Vargas, who led the analysis team, documented something disturbing. The main buildings, the theater, library, hospital, were not only architecturally advanced for 1973, they contained design elements that simply didn't exist at that time. The theater, for example, had an acoustic system based on principles that wouldn't be developed until the 1990s. Sound waves were distributed so perfectly that a whisper on stage could be heard clearly in the last row of the 2,000 seats. The library was another enigma. Its 50,000 volumes included first editions of literary classics, but there was also a complete section of books in languages that no linguist could fully identify. The symbols seemed an impossible mixture of cuneiform writing, ancient Chinese characters, and something completely unknown. A professor of dead languages from the University of Santiago spent 3 months trying to decipher just one page. His conclusion was disturbing. Whoever had written those texts knew writing systems that supposedly had never coexisted in the same time or place. But it was the details of daily life that were most disconcerting. At the San Jose Central Hospital, surgeries scheduled for October 16th were still written on the boards. Gallbladder operation for Rosa Mendel at 7 a.m. Scheduled cesarean for Carmen Soto at 10 a.m. Medical records were perfectly ordered, but when reviewing them, investigators noticed something strange. Of the 127 births registered in 1973, there was no trace of any of those babies, no baptismal certificates, no subsequent school records, as if they had been born to disappear. Primary school number 1 told its own silent story. In the classrooms, desks preserved notebooks open with half-finished homework, math problems whose answers remained suspended in air, compositions about my family that described lives that no longer existed. Most disturbing were the lunchboxes. After 13 years, sandwiches and fruits showed no normal decomposition. They were mummified, preserved by some process that scientists couldn't explain. The municipal market defied the laws of nature. Fruits and vegetables at the stalls had lost color and dried out, but maintained their perfect shape. Tomatoes looked like red sculptures. Apples, perfect spheres covered with a strange patina. When investigators tried to take samples, they discovered that these foods had altered molecular composition, as if they had been subjected to some type of unknown radiation. The city's intercom system was another technological anomaly. It connected every home, every office, every public space in a communication network that shouldn't have been possible with 1973 technology. Telecommunications engineers were perplexed. The system didn't use traditional copper cables, but a fiber that seemed organic, conducting signals in ways that violated known principles of physics. In 1987 came the first serious attempt to repopulate Esperanza del Norte. The government, seeing the economic potential of a fully equipped city and still productive mines, recruited 50 volunteer families. They offered them free houses, triple salaries, and permanence bonuses. The families arrived enthusiastically. They settled in the best houses, enrolled their children in school, reopened the market. They lasted exactly 72 hours. The testimonies of the evacuees were consistent and terrifying. The first night, everyone had the same dream. They dreamed they were walking through the city streets, but they weren't alone. Translucent figures watched them from windows, followed them down sidewalks, sat at their tables during dinner. They weren't threatening, just present, watching, waiting. The second night was worse. Children began talking in their sleep in a language their parents didn't recognize. Adults woke up at exactly 11:47 p.m., without exception, with the absolute certainty that they should leave their houses and walk to the central plaza. Those who resisted the impulse described unbearable mental pressure, as if their own thoughts didn't belong to them. By the third night, the families were terrified. Electrical appliances turned on by themselves. Radios tuned to stations that broadcast music from the 1940s, but with lyrics that spoke of future events. Televisions showed programs where the faces of the residents themselves appeared, but aged, in situations they hadn't lived through. The final straw occurred at 11:47 p.m. on that third night. All the city's intercoms activated simultaneously. A voice, neither masculine nor feminine, neither young nor old, spoke in perfectly clear Spanish. "It is not yet time. Return when the stars align again." The 50 families didn't wait for dawn. They packed the essentials and fled in convoy, leaving behind all the comforts they had come to seek. The government tried to minimize the incident, but rumors spread. In 1991, they established a military research base with rotating personnel who didn't spend nights in the city. In 1995, an international scientific expedition arrived with advanced measuring equipment. Their readings confirmed the unthinkable. Within the perimeter of Esperanza del Norte, physical laws functioned slightly differently. Gravity was 0.003% weaker. Time passed 0.3% slower. Minuscule anomalies, but measurable and constant. The pattern was clearly established. Nobody could remain more than 7 days in Esperanza del Norte without experiencing what scientists cautiously called adverse psychotemporal effects. The city existed, perfectly preserved, perfectly equipped, perfectly empty, waiting for something, or someone. Chapter 3. The Secrets Underground. The year 2001 marked a turning point in the investigation of Esperanza del Norte. Ground-penetrating radar technology had advanced enough to perform deep explorations without excavation. What Dr. Eduardo Ramirez's team discovered 500 meters below the surface would forever change the understanding of the mystery. They weren't simple mining tunnels. It was a network of galleries extending for more than 200 kilometers, connecting points that didn't appear on any official mining map. The architecture of these tunnels defied all logic. While the upper copper mines showed the rough construction typical of industrial mining, these deep tunnels exhibited perfect mathematical precision. The walls formed exact 90-degree angles. The ceilings maintained a constant height of 3.14 meters. Archaeologists immediately recognized the importance of that measurement. Pi meters. Initial carbon-14 dating produced impossible results. Different sections of the tunnels showed antiquities ranging from 500 to 15,000 years. But most disconcerting was that the oldest sections showed the most advanced technology, as if history had flowed backwards in this place. The most significant discovery occurred in what they called the Chamber of Symbols. The walls were covered with inscriptions that mixed Egyptian hieroglyphics, Nordic runes, Mayan characters, and completely unknown symbols. The impossible thing was that these writing systems, separated by oceans and millennia, integrated into a cohesive message. Dr. Patricia Morales, expert in ancient languages, spent months trying to decipher the text. Her partial translation spoke of those who wait between worlds and the cycle that completes when the stars remember their song. It was then that leaked documents appeared. A former National Archive employee, whose identity was never revealed, delivered to the press copies of classified files dating from 1968. The Chilean government had known about the anomalies in the area 5 years before Esperanza del Norte was officially founded. Even more disturbing, the city had been built specifically in that location as part of something called Project Esperanza. The documents were fragmentary. Many pages had been censored or destroyed, but what remained was revealing. Project Esperanza wasn't just a mining operation. It was an experiment of unspecified nature involving scientists from multiple disciplines: physicists, biologists, psychologists, and surprisingly, experts in comparative mythology. The list of original residents of Esperanza del Norte added another layer to the mystery. Of the 8,000 registered inhabitants, approximately 2,400, 30%, didn't appear in any other Chilean civil registry. They had no previous histories, no traceable families, no documented past. They simply appeared in the city records as if they had materialized from nothing. The recovered medical reports were even more disturbing. Dr. Alejandro Vasquez, chief physician of the hospital between 1970 and 1973, had documented subtle genetic changes in children born in the city. Nothing dramatic, small variations in mitochondrial DNA structure, slight changes in certain enzyme activity. But these changes followed a consistent pattern, as if the city itself was subtly modifying its inhabitants. Intercepted communications during the days preceding the disappearance painted a picture of a community that knew something extraordinary was about to happen. Coded messages spoke of final preparation, imminent convergence, and scheduled transition. One particularly cryptic message, dated October 14, 1973, said, "Tests have confirmed resonance. We will initiate at the appointed hour. Those who chose to stay must be in their assigned positions." In 2003, the team of speleologists who attempted to physically explore the deep tunnels made a discovery that challenged all archaeological understanding. In a chamber 700 meters deep, they found what they could only describe as ancient technology, mechanical devices of unknown purpose, built with alloys that didn't match any known metal. These artifacts showed no signs of corrosion despite their apparent antiquity, but it was the Hall of Mirrors that truly shattered the team's perceptions of reality. It was a perfectly spherical chamber, with walls polished to an impossible shine. When the explorers entered, their reflections didn't correspond to their movements. The mirrors showed versions of themselves at different ages, different clothes, different expressions. One of the speleologists swore he saw his reflection writing in a language he didn't know. Another saw his double conversing with figures who weren't present in the hall. Esperanza del Norte's astronomical observatory provided another piece of the puzzle. Its meticulously preserved records documented sightings of celestial objects that didn't appear in any astronomical catalogue. But most intriguing was the stone calendar found in the tunnels. It not only marked past dates with verifiable historical events, but also indicated future dates with specific descriptions. Several of these predictions had already been fulfilled with chilling precision. Mathematical calculations found on the observatory's blackboards and in various city laboratories showed equations that modern mathematicians were just beginning to understand. They seemed to describe additional dimensions of space-time, ways to manipulate reality at the quantum level, concepts that modern theoretical physics had only begun to explore. On the night of October 15, 1973, according to astronomers' confirmation, an extremely rare celestial conjunction had occurred, an alignment of planets and stars that, according to found calculations, occurs every 2,847 years. The next one is scheduled for 2027, and in the depths of the tunnels, engraved on a plate of unknown metal, an inscription in modern Spanish warned, "When the stars remember their song, those who departed will return to complete the circle." Chapter 4. Testimonies of those who tried to return. Maria Esperanza Valdés was 7 years old when she left Esperanza del Norte. In 2010, at age 44, she decided to return to seek answers about her missing family. Her testimony, recorded on video before authorities prohibited her from speaking publicly, is one of the most disturbing documents related to the ghost town. "My dad worked the night shift at the mine," Maria related as tears ran down her cheeks. "That night of October 15th, my mom got me out of bed at 9 p.m. She said we had to visit Grandma in Santiago urgently. We had never been to Santiago. We didn't have a grandmother there." Maria remembered the bus trip, her mother crying silently, refusing to explain why they had left everything behind. They grew up in poverty, her mother working at whatever she could, always avoiding talking about Esperanza del Norte. It was only after her mother's death in 2009 that Maria found documents that led her back. When she entered her old house at 247 Los Mineros Street, everything was exactly as she remembered. Her toys in the same position. The dress her mother was sewing for her 8th birthday, still in the Singer sewing machine. But on the dining room table she found something that chilled her. A family photo album she had never seen. In the photographs she appeared herself, but older, celebrating birthdays she never had, graduating from a school she never attended, marrying a man she didn't know. The most terrible thing, Maria whispered in the recording, is that in those photos I looked happy. Happier than I've ever been. On the last page of the album she found a letter addressed to her, written in her own adult handwriting. The letter described a life in Esperanza del Norte that she never lived, spoke of her children, whom she never had, and mentioned, "When you read this you'll know you chose the other path. We chose to stay. There is no regret. See you at the convergence." But the final blow came when Maria found in her father's desk her own death certificate dated May 23, 1985. Cause of death: incomplete dimensional transition. The paranormal investigation team that arrived in 2015 was better prepared. 12 investigators with state-of-the-art equipment, thermal cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, ultra-frequency recorders, radiation meters. Their 7-day expedition is completely documented, and the results defy any rational explanation. Electromagnetic readings showed energy peaks that followed precise mathematical patterns. Not random, but sequences that corresponded to prime numbers, the golden ratio, and other fundamental mathematical constants. It was as if the city itself was transmitting a coded message in the universal language of mathematics. Audio recordings captured complete conversations in ancient Spanish, mixed with words in an unidentified language. The voices spoke of everyday events, market prices, neighborhood gossip, weekend plans. But the events they described didn't correspond to any known era. They mentioned technologies that don't exist, places that aren't on any map, people who, according to records, were never born. Thermal cameras revealed the most disturbing thing: humanoid figures that maintained a constant temperature of 36.5 degrees Celsius, normal human body temperature, but weren't visible to the naked eye. These figures moved through the city following specific routines, entering houses at determined times, sitting in specific places, interacting with each other following complex social patterns. On day 5 of the expedition occurred the incident that forced evacuation. At 11:47 p.m., 3 investigators, Dr. Carmen Ruiz, technician Jose Palma, and cameraman Miguel Angel Torres, simultaneously entered a trance state. With open eyes but not responding to external stimuli, they began speaking in unison. "The convergence approaches. The paths will separate again. Those who remember must prepare those who forgot. The circle almost completes." When they regained consciousness hours later, all 3 had vivid memories of having lived complete lives in Esperanza del Norte. They could describe in detail jobs they never had, spouses they never met, children who were never born. Dr. Ruiz could even perform complex medical procedures she had never studied, claiming to have learned them at the other hospital. The most extraordinary testimony came from someone who should never have existed. In August 2019, a man who identified himself as Rodrigo Salinas contacted several investigators. He claimed to be an original resident of Esperanza del Norte, one of the 8,000 who disappeared in 1973. The problem was his age. He said he was 78 years old, but appeared no more than 35. The encounter was recorded clandestinely. Rodrigo described with precision details of the city that only someone who had lived there could know. He spoke of the specific taste of bread from the Hermanos Castillo bakery, the particular sound the old cinema projector made, of people whose names appeared in records but whom nobody else remembered. His version of the events of October 15th was chilling in its simplicity. "We didn't disappear. The outside world disappeared for us. We're still here. We've always been here. We live between moments. in the spaces that exist between 1 second and the next. For us, days have passed. For you, decades. When asked why he had returned, his response was even more disturbing. I haven't returned. I never left. You are the ones who are finally arriving where we have always been. The city is waiting for the right moment to reveal its purpose, and that moment is approaching. Military guards who patrolled the perimeter began reporting increasingly frequent incidents in 2018. A former sergeant, under condition of anonymity, revealed protocols the public never knew. There was a permanent order: do not interfere with the natural processes of the site. What did that mean exactly? Guards were forbidden from investigating anomalous lights, inexplicable sounds, or the figures occasionally seen moving between buildings. The worst were the changes, confessed the former military man. Sometimes you'd do rounds, and there would be a new house that wasn't there the day before. Or a street would change direction. Or you'd find a park with rusty playground equipment where you swore there had been an empty parking lot. Drones were systematically shot down by some type of electromagnetic pulse if they tried to fly over the city center. Satellite photographs showed inconsistencies. Images taken minutes apart showed different building configurations, as if the city existed in multiple simultaneous states. By 2020, accumulated evidence suggested something that conventional science couldn't accept. Esperanza del Norte wasn't an abandoned city. It was a city that existed in a state of macroscopic quantum superposition, inhabited by people who had found a way to exist outside normal temporal flow. And according to all indications, they were preparing for something big. Chapter 5: The Truth Nobody Can Accept. On March 15, 2020, a construction team performing maintenance in the mine's upper tunnels made the discovery that would change everything. Inside a hermetically sealed stainless steel container designed to withstand extreme conditions, they found a magnetic tape and a 16mm projector. The tape contained the voice of Dr. Hernan Espinoza, director of Project Esperanza. If you're listening to this, the recording began with a calm voice. It means the experiment has entered its final phase. Everything went exactly as planned. The 8,000 volunteers knew the risks and rewards. They chose to transcend the limitations of linear existence. The recording detailed the true nature of Project Esperanza. It wasn't a covert mining operation. It was a quantum physics experiment applied on a massive scale, designed to create what Espinoza called a controlled dimensional transition. The inhabitants of Esperanza del Norte hadn't been victims. They had been voluntary participants in humanity's most ambitious attempt to overcome the barriers of space-time. We discovered that collective consciousness, when aligned with mathematical precision, under specific geographical and astronomical conditions, can alter the fundamental structure of reality, Espinoza explained. The ancients knew it, the builders of the tunnels knew it. We only rediscovered and perfected the technique. The film that accompanied the recording showed the final preparations. Thousands of people gathered in the central plaza, forming precise geometric patterns. Children, adults, elderly, all moving with perfect synchronization, as if they were cells of a larger organism. In the center, a device that seemed to combine modern technology with elements from the ancient artifacts found in the tunnels. At 11:47 p.m. on October 15, 1973, the device activated. The film showed how the air itself seemed to crystallize, how light bent at impossible angles, how people began to glow with a soft luminescence. And then, in an instant the camera could barely capture, the plaza emptied. But it wasn't a disappearance. It was a transformation. Modern scientific analyses of Esperanza del Norte confirmed the impossible. The city existed in a state of macroscopic quantum superposition. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, quantum physicist from MIT, who led the study in 2021, explained it in terms that defied understanding. It's as if the inhabitants found a way to exist in multiple simultaneous states. They are here, and they are not here. They exist in our time and outside of it. Measurements confirmed that time flowed 0.3% slower within the city perimeter. The difference was minimal, but cumulative. In the 47 years since the disappearance, inhabitants would have experienced approximately 2 months less time than the outside world. But equations suggested this was only the superficial manifestation of a much deeper phenomenon. The radiation detected in the city didn't correspond to any element on the periodic table. It was a form of energy that physicists had only theorized, particles that existed in additional dimensions of space-time. The core of this anomaly was located exactly under the central plaza, at the point where all the ancient tunnels converged. Classified satellite images, leaked by an anonymous whistleblower in 2022, revealed the most disturbing truth. Using multispectral imaging technology, satellites had detected heat signatures consistent with 8,000 human bodies moving through the city. But these figures were only visible in very specific spectrums of light, frequencies that the human eye couldn't perceive naturally. Even more disturbing was the discovery that Esperanza del Norte wasn't unique. Analysis of global satellite data revealed 6 other sites in the world: in Siberia, Central Africa, the Amazon, the Himalayas, Central Australia, and Antarctica, that showed exactly the same anomaly patterns. All built over networks of ancient tunnels, all showing activity in non-visible spectrums, all pulsing energy towards space every night at 11:47 local time. The pattern suggested a global network, a planetary system designed with a purpose we were barely beginning to understand. Mathematicians who analyzed the locations discovered they formed a perfect geometric pattern, a dodecahedron inscribed in the Earth's sphere. Each site was a vertex of this impossibly precise 3-dimensional figure. In 2023, the Chilean government announced plans to permanently seal Esperanza del Norte in 2025. The decision was met with protests from the international scientific community. Dr. Sarah Chen, leader of the International Consortium for the Study of Quantum Anomalies, warned, "We are facing the most important discovery in human history. Esperanza del Norte could contain the keys to the next stage of human evolution, to interstellar travel, to fundamental understanding of reality." But others warned of the dangers. Psychiatric reports of those who had spent time in the city showed permanent changes in brain structure, new neural connections that shouldn't be possible, expanded cognitive abilities but accompanied by gradual disconnection from consensual reality. The most recent calculations, based on the progression of anomalies, suggested that something significant would occur in 2027. The same astronomical conjunction that had occurred in 1973 would repeat. The energy emitted by the 7 sites was increasing exponentially. Equations predicted an inflection point, a moment where the barrier between dimensions would be thin enough for what exactly? Nobody could say with certainty. An elderly Mapuche woman who lived near Esperanza del Norte expressed it more poetically. "When they return, the world will have changed to receive them. Or perhaps we will have changed to be able to see them. The city waits. It has always waited, and when the stars sing the ancient song, the 2 worlds will become one again." The latest measurements from 2024 showed something extraordinary. At sunset, when sunlight hit the city at the precise angle, the shadows cast didn't correspond to visible buildings. They were shadows of taller, more complex structures, as if for a moment the veil between dimensions became translucent. And in those shadows, 8,000 human silhouettes moved with purpose, continuing lives they had chosen to live beyond the limits of our understanding. Esperanza del Norte remains, waiting. The clocks continue marking 11:47. The houses remain empty to our eyes. But every night, when the stars align over the Atacama Desert, the city pulses with energy that promises to reveal truths humanity might not be ready to accept. The city that remained uninhabited forever might be, in reality, the most inhabited of all. Only its residents chose to inhabit a forever different from ours. And while the sun sets over Esperanza del Norte each day, 8,000 shadows are cast from empty buildings, waiting for the moment when 2 worlds become one again. Chapter 6, The Echo of What We Were. There is something that all these places have in common, something that goes beyond their individual stories of abandonment and mystery. From Centralia with its eternal fire to the perfect replicas of Temps Town, from the curses of Kuldara to the buried diamonds in Kolmanskop, each of these places is telling us the same fundamental story, that everything we build is temporary, but some places refuse to be forgotten. During this hour, we have traveled through an invisible map, one that doesn't appear in any official atlas. It's the map of places that were left uninhabited forever, each one for completely different reasons, but all united by that strange quality of remaining present in their absence. Centralia taught us that sometimes the earth itself rebels against us, a fire that has been burning under our feet for 60 years, turning a normal mining town into an alien landscape where the ground reaches oven temperatures. Todd Domboski falling into that hole of poisonous gases in 1980 wasn't just an accident. It was the moment when the Earth told humanity, "You can no longer live here." And the thing is that Centralia is still there. It didn't disappear like other ghost towns. It keeps smoking, keeps hot, keeps burning. Scientists say it's going to continue like this for another 250 years. It's as if the place had developed its own life, a life that doesn't need humans. But then there's Kuldara, where the abandonment was even more mysterious. 1,500 people who simply vanished in a single night in 1825. There was no fire, no war, no natural disaster. Just a collective decision so radical that it's almost impossible to believe. The Palawal Brahmins preferred to disappear rather than submit to humiliation, and in the process cursed the place so that no one else could ever inhabit it. The crazy thing is that the curse worked. For 200 years, every attempt at resettlement has failed. Families who move into the abandoned houses report dreams so vivid they can't sleep, animals that refuse to stay, crops that fail without explanation. Modern researchers have documented electromagnetic anomalies, inexplicable cold spots in the middle of the desert, digital equipment that systematically fails in the same places. Is the curse real, or is it the power of collective belief reinforced for generations? In the end, it doesn't matter. The result is the same. Kuldara remains empty, preserved at the exact moment of its abandonment, like a photograph of a community that chose extinction over dishonor. Hashima Island told us another story. Here there were no curses or underground fires. It was pure industrial capitalism in its most extreme form. 480 meters by 160 meters, housing more than 5,000 people in 1959, becoming the most densely populated place in the world. A concrete fortress that rose directly from the ocean waves. Families lived in apartments of a few tatami mats, went up and down narrow stairs without elevators, raised their children on balconies that faced the infinite sea. It was a vertical civilization, completely artificial, sustained by coal tunnels that extended more than a kilometer under the ocean. And when oil replaced coal as fuel, everything ended in months. On April 20th, 1974, the last resident abandoned the island. There was no drama, no resistance. The economic reason for existing simply ended, and 5,000 people left as if they had never been there. What's disturbing about Hashima is how well preserved it is. The concrete buildings resist typhoons. The apartments maintain the furniture from the 70s. The school classrooms still have the desks where children learned while the mine machines roared below. It's like a museum of industrial impermanence, a reminder that even the communities that seem most solid can evaporate overnight. Landia taught us what happens when we try to impose one culture on another without understanding absolutely nothing about the place where we are. Henry Ford spent the equivalent of hundreds of millions of current dollars trying to create a perfect America in the heart of the Amazon. He wanted to grow rubber, but above all, he wanted to create Brazilians who lived like ideal Americans. The failure was epic and educational. Brazilian workers forced to eat hamburgers and oatmeal instead of their traditional meals, obligated to participate in square dances, prohibited from drinking alcohol. The prefabricated houses designed for temperate climates became ovens under the tropical sun. And the rubber trees, planted in perfect monocultures as if they were Michigan corn, were devastated by native fungi that had evolved specifically to attack them. The Quebra Panela revolt of 1930 was inevitable. The workers destroyed the cafeteria, overturned cars, chased the American managers into the jungle. The Brazilian army had to intervene to restore order. It was a total humiliation that revealed the fundamental disconnect between Ford's industrial vision and Amazonian reality. Today, the jungle is actively digesting the remains of Ford Landia. Roots break the concrete foundations, vines dismantle the walls, humidity accelerates decomposition in an amazing way. Some of the original rubber trees, stunted and diseased, still produce small amounts of latex that locals occasionally collect. It's a perfect irony, the postscript of a failed industrial vision. Kayakoi showed us the most painful type of abandonment of all, when nations decide who can live where. The Convention of Lausanne of 1923 wasn't a war or a natural disaster. It was a document signed in Switzerland that decreed that 10,000 Orthodox Greeks who had lived in these hills for more than 2,000 years could no longer stay because they were of the incorrect religious type. The population exchange was presented as a humanitarian and civilized solution. Entire families had weeks to pack what they could carry and abandon houses where their great-grandparents had been born. The Turkish Muslims who were supposed to replace them never arrived in sufficient numbers, and many of those who did arrive found the atmosphere so oppressive that they went elsewhere. What remained is a town frozen at the moment of evacuation. The Orthodox churches preserve their frescoes. The houses maintain the original furniture. Family photographs are still scattered on the floors, but most disturbing are the inexplicable phenomena. Families who try to live in the restored houses report vivid dreams of the previous inhabitants, conversations in Greek that resonate in empty houses, phantom bells that ring on Orthodox holidays. Children who visit Kayakoi often demonstrate knowledge they shouldn't have, pointing to specific houses and describing the families who lived there, naming churches they've never seen before. When asked how they know these things, they can't explain it and generally forget the details once they leave the town, as if the information belonged to the place and not to them. Kolmanskop gave us the most beautiful vision of abandonment. In the Namib Desert, where the oldest dunes on Earth move with winds that have blown for millions of years, what was temporarily the richest place per capita in the world was built. Diamonds literally scattered on the surface like jewels from a god who had lost his jewelry box. But the sand was always waiting. From the first day, entire teams worked exclusively removing sand from the streets and buildings. It was like trying to empty the ocean with a spoon. And when the easy diamonds were exhausted and people left, the sand immediately moved back. What the sand did with Kolmanskop transcends simple abandonment. It didn't destroy the buildings. It preserved and transformed them. The wallpaper maintains its original colors, protected by the sand that covers it. European furniture emerges from the dunes like modern sculptures. Each room tells a different story of the relationship between human ambition and natural force. Walking through Kolmanskop today is like touring a museum where the exhibits constantly change but never lose their power to amaze. The hospital has sand up to the waist, but the surgical table still rises above the dunes like an island. The ballroom preserves its elegant chandelier hanging over a floor, transformed into sand hills that are remodeled with each wind. The sand isn't destroying Kolmanskop, it's collaborating with it, creating spaces that no architect could design and no museum could curate. Humberstone taught us that sometimes the most impossible places for human life are the ones that best preserve our attempts to create community. In the Atacama Desert, where some weather stations have never recorded a single drop of rain, thousands of families built not just mining operations, but complete civilizations. Olympic pools in the most arid place on Earth, theaters that received companies from Lima and Buenos Aires, schools that rivaled urban institutions, all sustained by the extraction of saltpeter, the white gold that fertilized the world and manufactured explosives until synthetics made it obsolete overnight. The preservation in Humberstone is almost supernatural. Product labels remain legible in the company store. Medicine bottles preserve instructions in multiple languages. The barbershop maintains hair from the last customer on the floor. It's as if time had stopped the day they closed operations. But most moving are the recreational spaces. The theater seats, although faded, still show the impressions of the bodies that occupied them during decades of entertainment. The dance hall floor maps the movements of countless dancers where different nationalities mixed in ways impossible in their countries of origin. The empty pool preserves the diving board from where children launch themselves into imported water under the gaze of parents who had traveled thousands of miles to give better lives to their families. And finally, Temps Town, which showed us the strangest type of abandonment, a place built for life, but inhabited mainly by simulations of life. A perfect replica of England in the suburbs of Shanghai, technically superior to many real English towns, but lacking the soul that develops organically over generations. Temps Town exists in a perpetual state of anticipation, waiting for a community that never fully arrived. On weekends, it fills with hundreds of couples posing for wedding photographs, using the imported architecture as a backdrop to document their romantic and cultural aspirations. For a few hours, the streets fill with laughter and music, then silence returns when the photographers leave. It's a place designed for authentic life, but inhabited by temporary performances. Streets built for thousands are populated by dozens. Daily maintenance preserves an unnatural perfection, erasing any evidence of real life in favor of a perpetual simulation. So what do all these places tell us about ourselves? First, that we are incredibly arrogant. We believe we can control forces that have been operating for millions of years. We build on top of active coal mines, plant monocultures and ecosystems that have evolved specific defenses against them, create entire communities in deserts that devour humidity. Second, that we are incredibly adaptable. For a time, all these communities worked. People lived, worked, fell in love, raised families in some of the most extreme and artificial environments imaginable. Children grew up thinking it was normal to swim in pools of imported water in deserts or live in apartments that rose directly from the ocean. Third, that when we leave traces that are impossible to erase completely. Even when nature reclaims our constructions, even when economic forces make our communities irrelevant, even when political decisions scatter us around the world, something remains. Centralia keeps burning. Kuldara remains cursed. Hashima keeps preserving life from the 70s. Landia keeps being digested by the jungle. Kayakoi keeps resonating with voices in Greek. Kolmanskop keeps being sculpted by sand. Humberstone keeps preserving dreams in the desert. Temps Town keeps waiting for residents who may never arrive. What's going to happen to these places? Some are going to continue existing for centuries. Centralia's fire is going to burn until 2270. Hashima's concrete structures are going to resist typhoons for decades more. The Atacama Desert is going to preserve Humberstone until someone finds an economic reason to disturb it. Others are going to change in ways we can't predict. Kuldara could finally free itself from its curse when the last person who believes in it dies. Kayakoi could find new life as a symbol of reconciliation between Turkey and Greece. Temps Town could evolve towards something authentic if enough people move there and create their own traditions. But the most important lesson is this: all the places we visited today remind us that we too are temporary. The cities where we live, the neighborhoods where we grew up, the jobs we have, the communities we take for granted, all of that can change or disappear faster than we think. The difference between places that are forgotten and those that become legendary isn't their success or failure, but the intensity of the stories they generate. Centralia wasn't more important than other mining towns, but its story of eternal fire captured something universal about unforeseen consequences. Kuldhara wasn't bigger than other Rajasthani villages, but its mysterious disappearance touches something deep about pride and resistance. In the end, all these uninhabited places are teaching us the same lesson, that what we build matters less than how we build it, why we build it, and what we do when we have to leave it behind. The most memorable places aren't the most successful ones, but those that force us to confront the contradictions of human ambition. Centralia reminds us that the earth has memory and sometimes takes revenge. Kuldara teaches us that there are things more important than physical survival. Hashima shows us the speed with which progress can become irrelevant. Landia warns us about cultural arrogance. Kayakoi confronts us with the human cost of political decisions. Kolmanskop presents nature as a collaborating artist. Humberstone demonstrates that dreams can be preserved in the most impossible places. Temps Town asks us what authenticity means in a world of simulations. These places, uninhabited forever, are not just historical curiosities or tourist destinations for urban explorers. They are mirrors that show us our obsessions, our fears, our limitations, and our extraordinary capacities for adaptation. And while we continue building, expanding, dreaming of permanence in a world that constantly changes, these places will continue being there as silent reminders that everything we believe solid can become smoke, sand, memory, or mystery. The echo of what we were keeps resonating in these empty places, waiting for someone to listen and learn from the stories that time cannot completely erase.